past handful of decades has been in flux with internal controversies, at least for 4 decades. And a lot of the discussions within the movement have focused on 2 issues: Sabbatarianism, which is impossible to justify biblically, and the doctrine of justification by faith, which is impossible to reconcile with the legalism that is at the core of virtually every Seventh-day Adventist doctrinal distinctive. And several well-known Adventist leaders over the past 40 years or so have questioned the received doctrines on those 2 matters, Sabbatarianism and justification. The best known and most influential voice that has raised those questions about Adventist doctrine is an Australian theologian and a former Adventist pastor named Desmond Ford. And his original concerns had to do with the issues that lie at the heart of the gospel, the issues of justification by faith, the role of good works, the imputation of Christ's righteousness. Is it implanted, imparted, imputed? That was the debate. And Desmond Ford became a critic of this vital Adventist doctrine known as investigative judgment. This is a teaching that claims Christ is currently examining and judging his people's works to determine whether this individual or that individual be justified or not. This is one of the novelties of Seventh-day Adventist doctrine that defines the Adventist confession of faith. This is one of the things that sets him apart from every other denomination. And it comes straight from Ellen White herself. She claimed that although Christ did not return in 1844, what happened then was that he moved from the holy place in the heavenly tabernacle to the Holy of Holies in heaven. And at that point, she says, he began this process known as investigative judgment, where he is reviewing the works of believers with an eye to their final judgment. Now, remember, in those days, Ellen White was teaching that the door of salvation was totally closed to everyone who wasn't already in, and the Millerites who had actually kept the faith. But, she said, even they are to be judged according to their works. So she says, Christ is in heaven, reviewing the instant replays or whatever. And as soon as he finishes this work, she said, he will return to earth. And she said, that'll be very soon. That's what they believed. And so this doctrine of investigative judgment has at its heart a heavy emphasis on human works and human righteousness, and frankly, it is impossible to reconcile this doctrine with the biblical teaching about justification by faith. But ever since Ellen White first promoted this doctrine, it has been considered one of the pillars of Seventh-day Adventist belief. Desmond Ford, the Adventist pastor, questioned it, and in 1980, he was excommunicated from the cult for doubting that doctrine. He's not formally been a member of the Seventh-day Adventist denomination for more than 35 years, and yet he refuses to let go or even acknowledge some of the group's most egregious errors. He's still a Saturday Sabbatarian. He still follows a vegetarian lifestyle and believes Ellen White's notions about diet and health. Most of all, he still reveres Ellen White as a prophetess and insists that her writings are at least valuable, if not inspired. So he thinks what this manifestly false prophetess wrote is superior to all other works on the Christian religion. It is very hard to cut that tie once you're ensnared in a group like this. We have actually several former Adventists here in Grace Church, and all of them will tell you that getting out of the cult is a very frightening and difficult proposition. The elitism that is so prominent in all cults instills a kind of superstitious fear that if you leave this group, it might forever lock you out of heaven. And in fact, many who leave Seventh-day Adventism end up either indifferent or overtly hostile to all forms of Christianity. In the 1970s, a wealthy Australian Seventh-day Adventist named Robert Brinsmead was influenced by Desmond Ford, and Brinsmead began questioning the Seventh-day Adventist doctrines. For a while, he dabbled in Reformed theology and began to publish a journal that got worldwide circulation for a few years, and it was quite good. It was called Present Truth, and it featured some hard-to-find writings that had been excerpted from the Puritans and other Reformed writers. This was before lots of Puritan reprints were available. And that magazine was free. It was well-edited, and I subscribed to it during my college career. That magazine gave me my first exposure to Puritan works. And Brinsmead also wrote one of the finest critiques of Sabbatarianism you'll ever read. But after being out of Adventism for several years, he began to derail spiritually. He dabbled, after he left Reformed theology, he dabbled in neo-orthodoxy and then moved to Socinianism. And today he is an elderly recluse who professes no religious faith at all. And Desmond Ford's son, Luke, followed an even more sinister path. At one point, he professed conversion to Judaism. And then he also seemed to abandon faith altogether, and he became a blogger, a famous blogger who reports on trends in the adult industry. And an article in Salon magazine called him the Matt Drudge of porn. That kind of gross apostasy is the fruit of cultish elitism. A person who is totally sold out to a religious group, thinking, I have found the one true church, and when he discovers that what he's being taught is actually based on lies and false prophecies and unbiblical doctrines, it's hard to shake off the disillusionment and then believe anything with real conviction after that. When you finally manage to cut that strong tie that binds you to the cult, if you don't embrace the true Christ with genuine faith and a renewed heart, you'll have no anchor whatsoever. On the other hand, even if you get excommunicated like Desmond Ford, assuming you can stave off complete disenchantment with all religion, it's hard to let go of the belief system you were sold out to. That's a major problem with any cult. But it's especially difficult to leave a legalistic group like the Seventh-day Adventists. Legalism is a powerful bondage that is very, very difficult to break. Any of the former Seventh-day Adventists here will affirm that. So let's review. These are the features of practically every cult: extra-biblical revelation, elitism, enslavement to the group and its rules. Seventh-day Adventism gets bad marks in every one of those categories. So what about the fourth and perhaps most important category of a cult? Error. Do they offer a different gospel? Do they present a different Jesus? Or do they have some other kind of heterodoxy on a similarly grand scale? And here again, you cannot avoid the conclusion that Seventh-day Adventism qualifies as a cult. They're not as blatantly heretical as the Mormons or the Jehovah's Witnesses. And certainly they aren't as far off track as Christian Science. But the subtlety of the Seventh-day Adventist error actually makes this cult a more immediate threat in our circles of fellowship. Seventh-day Adventism is a close parallel to the heresy Paul was confronting in his epistle to the Galatians. In that seminar I taught last year on Seventh-day Adventism, I remarked that Sabbatarianism is to Seventh-day Adventists what circumcision was to the Galatian heretics. The error of the Judaizers in Paul's time would probably seem trivial to the average evangelical today. Really, if we encountered it without any reference to the epistle to the Galatians, most evangelicals would look at that and say it's a trivial error. These are churchmen who had some kind of affiliation with the fellowship of believers in Jerusalem. They didn't deny the deity or the humanity of Christ. They freely confessed that Christ was Israel's Messiah. They believed in the resurrection. They affirmed the necessity of faith. And they no doubt spoke with great passion about grace and the forgiveness of sins and the promise of eternal life. They were advocates of holiness, and they appealed to the Scriptures as authoritative. So what was the big deal? Why did Paul actually curse these people as heretics? There was one significant difference between Paul and these heretics. Paul taught that good works were the fruit of justifying faith. The Judaizers insisted that good works were instrumental in justification. Or to say it another way, they revised the order of salvation. They said faith begets works, And faith plus good works beget justification. But Scripture says faith alone begets justification, and good works are the fruit of God's regenerating work. They're the fruit, not the cause of our justification. Romans 4, verses 4 and 5. To the one who works...
Yes, guys, you heard from the man himself, Phil Johnson. This is not the first time I have taken a clip from him and chose to play, because I find his two-part video, right? I've shared the link for his video in my comment section before. Whenever I take a clip from his videos, if you look in the comment section again, you'll see the clip where I actually took that from, right? But what I'm going to do is that I'm basically going to build on what he said just now, right? The effects of 7-day Adventism. Now, you would have seen for the past few days I have done a number of videos on the 7-day Adventist Church, right? Wherein the title is The Fruits of Adventism, right? Now, in my playlist section, I have a playlist titled, let me tell you the title for the playlist. Every time SDAs does something strange. The very first video is titled COVID-19 Pandemic and the SDA Church. And I showed for you a particular individual called Wilhelm Leckie. Right? This Wilhelm Leckie, I also showed a video of him with another individual named Andrew Enriquez. Right? Now, I have featured Wilhelm Leckie on my channel a number of times.
Why he did this, right? What building were closed from?
Right, I have showed him on my channel a number of times, including in my video that follow after name, The Gospel Changes Everything. And then there's a video titled 7-day Adventist Conference Presidents in JA Took COVID-19 Vaccine. I showed Wilhelm Leckie. Again, you will see him on the thumbnail, right? And I also show this Wilhelm Leckie again. Woman drops law studies to join SDA offshoots. And in my final video in the playlist, right? SDA is relocating to country and separating themselves from society, right? I read from an article, right? From a news article where Wilhelm Leckie's name is mentioned again. So many times I've covered this one individual. Right now, you can say Wilhelm Leckie is like the Jamaican version of Andrew Enriquez. Right? Now, when you go to Andrew Enriquez's channel and when you go to Wilhelm Leckie's YouTube channel, the Blueprint Ministry, right? Most of their videos is riddled with prophecy. Right? And when I talk about prophecy now, I'm not talking about biblical prophecy. It's their version of prophecy. Right? I've never been fortunate enough to listen to a video from them where the gospel is basically being preached. And so this is why I did a video in Cult 101 titled Cults and Eschatology, where I show you that when it comes to cults, many of them, they're caught up on prophecy. And being caught up on prophecy, you know, is not bad in and of itself, you know. But when I say caught up, I mean it's an unhealthy fascination with prophecy. So much so that all they ever talk about is prophecy. Every single day of their life, they're constantly watching what is going to happen. It's like when Jesus said watch, they think that their entire life is based on watching what is to come. It's almost as if that is how they interpret it. It's like their life is just doom and gloom, always looking at things to come. So every time they turn on their TV, right, any news that they read, is like all they can see and all they can read is last day's events. And it is due to this factor why even the young lady dropped her law studies and chose to follow the Blueprint Ministry. Because Jesus coming, it is literally at the doors. When Jesus said it's even at the doors for SDAs, it's like it's literally at the doors. It's like Jesus can come practically today, as far as they are concerned. They live the life. Okay, let me tell you how they do it. Let me tell you how they do it, right? Most Christians, they live their life as though every day might very well be their last day on earth. But they plan as though they have an next 100 years ahead of them. This is the standard for most Christians. But when it comes to SDAs, not only do they live their lives as if they might not live another day, but they plan as if they don't have a next year of life. They plan as though they don't have another day of life. And this is the problem with SDA and the system of Adventism, primarily the ones who follow after Ellen G. White. Because remember now, there are 4 different branches of SDAs. But we're talking about the fundamentals now in primarily. These ones who follow Ellen G. White, every day of their life, they plan as though they don't have another tomorrow. So this is why the young lady dropped her studies, because as far as she's concerned, it makes no sense I pursue something like that. Jesus coming is like there's not another let me see, she needed 2 more years to complete her studies. And basically, Jesus coming it's going to be we don't have 2 years to spare. Basically, it's going to be over before those 2 years. This is how cults actually think, and this is the fruits of Adventism. I can tell you, when I was in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, it is the same way I thought to myself, I don't have an next 5 years. I don't have an next 5 years, right? This is how many of them in the SDA Church actually think. And this is the fruits of Adventism, right? The legalism, the stress to keep up, and the amount of things that you have to do. Diet, you have to change your diet, right? And time would fail me to tell you the amount of problem that comes from Seventh-day Adventist dietary lifestyle. The stress to actually keep up with it, right? To adhere to their gospel of health. And then you don't even have a right to choose where you want to live. You have to live at a specific area. Now, as a child, I've always hated country. I've always hated the rural area. And being a Seventh-day Adventist, I have no choice but to migrate in rural areas. Right? Constant fear. Wondering if you measure up. Wondering when your name is going to call up in the investigative judgment. It's like you have no peace whatsoever. You have absolutely no peace, and there is always something to do. You always feel like you're not good enough, right? Always feel like you don't measure up. Oh gosh, I wonder if sometimes they don't get exhausted by the time they're finished working, right? And such are the fruits and effects of Adventism. There's always fear mongering, right? Every single person who ascends to presidency in America, you always hear that the end of time or the end of days is going to come through them. They said that about Barack Obama. Barack Obama finished his tenure. Trump came on the scene. They said that about Trump. Trump finished his tenure, and so far nothing did happen through Obama. Nothing did happen through Donald Trump. And now they're saying basically the same thing through Joe Biden. When Joe Biden finishes tenure and someone else come on the scene, they're going to say the same thing about him. And the cycle continues and continues and continues. Every single thing that happens in the media always has something to do with their prophecy. There is COVID-19, and COVID-19 has something to do with their prophecy. The vaccines has something to do with their prophecy. When this pandemic would have passed and so on, and something else happen in the world, best believe that it's going to have something to do with the Seventh-day Adventist Church and their prophecy. Not the wider body of Christ collectively, but something specifically to do with them, their prophecy, and what Ellen White says. It's just utterly ridiculous, guys. When I think about it, I'm so happy that I came out of that system. If you go through the catalog, my catalog, every time Seventh-day Adventist does something strange, and you look at every single one of those videos, just tell yourself, this is the fruits of Adventism, right? This is the fruits of Adventism. There's much more I can say, but I end this video right there. If you enjoyed, you know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. Bye bye now.